Welcome to the Bookish Hour with your hosts, Sarah E. Burr and J.C. Kenney. We'll be starting soon. And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an episode of the Bookish Hour. I am Sarah Burr.
And I am J.C. Kenney. It is a magical night tonight because not only is it Baby Friday, we have a fabulous paranormal guest joining us today. So, Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Let's get bookish. This week, we are so excited. It's been a week of releases and celebrating with authors on those releases. We are joined by the wonderful Trixie Silvertale. She is celebrating a best-selling release already, which is so exciting. Trixie, welcome back to the show. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's fun to be back. I like hanging out with you guys. You make it fun and easy, no stress. I like it.
That's what we like to hear. And I'm so excited that we actually get to continue our conversation a little bit. For folks who are joining us live now, welcome to the show. Trixie may be familiar to you if you caught her episode of A Bookish Moment that we had earlier this spring. And so we're going to be diving in to some of the topics that we explored there in a little bit more detail, but we'll also be giving you a nice little recap of what's going on. So, Trixie, for folks who may be meeting you for the first time, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Trixie Silvertale. I'm a USA Today bestselling author, and I have a book that released this week, which is the second book in my spin-off series, and just found out that is made #1 and then got its a little official orange flag today. Woo! So that was exciting. I write paranormal cozy mystery, and I have a very long-running 21-book series, the Mitzi Moon Mysteries, and then I also co-author the Magical Renaissance Fair Mysteries with Aaron Johnson and Nova Nelson, and then I also wrote a trilogy with Molly Fitz, which is the Moonlight Manor Mysteries. So that is, I think, everything.
That's it. Oh my gosh, your prolific writing is just so admirable. Like, I can only dream to be able to like deliver that much amazing content to readers. And so I'm just like really excited to get to flesh out more of your writing process and how you come up with these characters. But first, we are celebrating the release of Rodeo Clowns and Shakedowns. The last time you were here, like every time I was saying your Mitzi's name, the titles of your books, like I couldn't help but do a little shoulder shimmy. So there's always the fun titles. Can you give us
Best
a little bit?
Ever.
Yes, and we actually talked a little bit about how your ideas for the book really start with a title and build from there. So I can imagine that we've got something going on with a rodeo clown in this one. Can you share a little bit about what is happening for what Mitzi and Eric are up to in this latest mystery?
Yeah, absolutely. So as the title would lead you to believe, the rodeo is in town, and a rodeo clown is murdered in the middle of the arena in front of thousands of people, apparently by magic, essentially, because there's no one near him. So now they have to dive in and figure out what really happened. Mitzi, of course, being from the Southwest, thinks that she recognizes the wound as a rattlesnake bite, and they're in the fictional town of Pincherry Harbor in almost Canada. There are no rattlesnakes. Everyone thinks she's crazy. And so ensues, the adventure where they discover how, all of this happened and how he really died and who's responsible and all of that. But I try to give them different situations, and it's kind of fun for me to try to come up with a new way to kill people. So I'm like, rattlesnake. I like it. Now, how do I get a rattlesnake to almost Canada?
I was gonna ask, because you have written this. Now, this is the So you've got the 21 from the Mitzi Moon series,
And two short
then
stories.
two
in
short
that one.
stories. Then you
Yep.
have the prequel to the sequel, which was Ropes and Last Hopes, or and then
Yes.
Bells and Bombshells. Am I getting all the
Yep.
titles? All right.
Correct.
And
You
so
are.
you have so many ways that you've killed people.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did the idea for the murder weapon in this book come to you? Like, what's your process for like figuring out how to kill someone now that you've done it so many times?
Yeah. Well,
By the way, folks, we're talking metaphorically.
Metaphorically, of
Yes,
course, yes.
Yes.
A disclaimer along
a
the
disclaimer, never actually killed anyone. My search history is terrifying, though. Well, for me, I think we talked about this last time. For me, the whole concept always starts with the title. So I have a multi-page Word doc where whenever I think of titles, I just put them in there. And then when I get ready to write another book, I take because I try to keep my books in the time frame they're released. So for instance, this book is coming out now and it all takes place at a July 4th rodeo kind of a thing. So, it's summertime. So I try to think, okay, it's summertime. What are people doing? I've had a storm and a drowning. I've had a tornado. I've had, so I just try to think of different things. And I have a very good friend who is a herpetologist and is snake crazy. And when I was, coming up with things, I was like, ooh, that could be a way to do it, especially if it's outside of the snake's natural habitat. The medical personnel wouldn't have antivenom because it wouldn't be something that they would, be familiar with. So very good chance that the victim would die, so wheels are spinning. Then I have to text my friend, oh, I need, to ask you snake questions. And literally I get a text back at 6 a.m. the next morning. Are you ready to talk about snakes?
That's
like,
awesome.
Okay, maybe I should have specified a little bit better. But, I whenever I go into an area like that where I think, ooh, this is interesting, but I don't know anything about it really, then I try to find some kind of an expert. I've talked to my local police officers before about different things and, just whatever I need to kind of validate where I'm going with my imaginary scenario.
Well, I think that's amazing because, to come up with a title and then come up with the murder scenario and then go with the story. That's just a really cool, interesting, unique beginning of the writing process. And one of the other things that makes me then wonder is you shared with us your very unique writing style. And for those who weren't able to join us the last time you were here, if you wouldn't mind sharing that a little bit, and especially then the special dictation software you use for our fellow writers.
Yeah, so I'm not a fast typist. I'm just not. I almost failed typing in school. I did everything I could in college to avoid taking classes that had computer. I was like really against the whole thing. So I'm not a fast typist. And so that was one of my barriers to being able to write as fast as my brain worked. And it was frustrating because I would get bogged down with the slowness of my typing skills and people kept suggesting dictation. And I was like, oh, I don't know, that sounds too complicated. There's so many steps and, put up my own mental barriers. And then finally I got to the point where I can't produce what I want to produce. It's not working. It's not coming out on the page like I want it to. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try this dictation thing. And I talked to, I think her name is Mary Buckingham. She, back when Dragon Dictate was serving both the IBM based and Mac based platforms equally, which now for some reason they've turned their back on Mac. I don't know. Anyway, she was writing books on the software and how to train it and how to do all these more advanced things that would streamline your process. So she was kind enough to give me an arc of the book that she was writing at that time, which was really getting into what ended up being the last version of the Mac Dragon Dictate software. And I got a little recorder, so I have a little handheld recorder, because I tried doing it dictating as I sat in front of the computer screen, and I thought I was going to blow my brains out, because you're watching it make mistakes, and then you want to stop and you want to create, and you can't write creatively when you're in editor mode. So I had to get away from the computer. So I got my handy dandy little recorder, and I love roller skating, so I strap on my roller skates, get my handy dandy recorder, and I just skate around for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever it is that day. And I can get 2,500 words. If I skate for 45 minutes, I can get about 2,500 words. And then I have to, of course, edit that, because everyone's seen the dictation fails, which are usually pretty hilarious. But if you do the editing right after, everything's kind of still fresh enough in your mind that you can usually figure out, even if it's incredibly strange, which occasionally it is. But, so that's kind of my process for getting what's in my brain into the computer.
That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
When I used to work in healthcare IT, and Dragon Dictation was used by providers, and they would call, be like, it's not working, and all of this stuff. It's like, this isn't my program. I don't know how to really help you with this.
I didn't make it.
So when to hear that you were able to channel that into a creative outlet that helped you through those, and you mentioned mental barriers. I think when it comes to writing, even if you're a first time writer, you're just sitting down to be like, I have an idea in my head, like, what do I do? Or you've written, 20 books at this point. What are some of the mental barriers that you have encountered throughout your writing career, and what are some suggestions for folks who may be just starting out to help get past those? Because I think a lot of folks get stuck there and they don't know how to move forward. Yeah,
I think one of the biggest ones that I hear a lot is, I don't have time. I just don't have time. I have young kids, or I have a disabled pet that I care for, or whatever. People have all kinds of different things in their life. And one of the things that I like about the dictation is it's a tiny little recorder. I can carry it with me all the time. If I'm sitting somewhere waiting for something in the car, I can dictate for 10 minutes if that's all I have, So I don't have to lug around a computer and a notebook and a whole bunch of stuff. I can just dictate a scene, or part of a scene, or some clever little twist that I can throw into a, save this for later document in that particular file. So that's one of the advantages to dictation, is just kind of being able to have that with you wherever you go, and take advantage to whatever time you're given. I think another one that I hear a lot of is, I don't think my writing's good enough. I'm not, I just keep editing and editing and editing, and I never want to publish. Well, everyone thinks that. Absolutely. Stephen King thinks that. Everyone thinks that. The imposter syndrome is incredibly real, no matter how many books you've written. And I've written close to 50 at this point in my life. And as soon as I finish the first draft, I hate every bit of it. I can't imagine, that I'll ever publish this horrible book that I've written. So writing is rewriting. Writing is rewriting. You come up with the idea, you get it out. Don't edit yourself. Don't stop yourself in the process. Just allow the creativity to flow. And when you finish, you might have a better idea. You might go back and change a scene. I'm working on book 3 in this Harper and Moon Investigation series, and I finished it and I was like, oh, that doesn't work at all. I was like, okay, I have to go back. That guy's not going to be that anymore. He has this new role. This is going to happen. We're going to get rid of this extra thing. A friend of mine calls them spare parts. When you get to the end and you're like, I have one too many murder weapons, or, one too many killers, or whatever it is. There's spare parts, and you just have to chuck them. I'm sure everyone's heard the famous quote, kill your darlings, kind of a thing. Sometimes the thing that you thought was the coolest thing, when you get to the end, it doesn't work in the overall story. And that's really what you're trying to do, is give the reader the best experience. And it's hard when it's your story and your creativity and your baby that you nurtured and you lovingly put onto that page. Sometimes you can't, you can't keep it all. And so I think that's the really important piece. Write when you're writing, edit when you're editing. Don't mix the two. Give yourself the space to just be creative and write whatever is in there, and then go back and edit it and mold it into the genre that you're writing in, or whatever you need to do.
I think that
You know,
that
is
like A plus advice, because
Yes.
I'm right in the middle of editing my third trending topic mystery right now. And when I finished it, I had kind of gone by the end. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write what's in my head right now, because things like people have changed names, they've changed relationships, the killer's different, like all of this stuff was happening. And it's like, no, I just have to keep going, because I think and I always think this myself, is when I have written it down, it's not set in stone. It's very easy to highlight a paragraph and delete it. Or it's very easy to write 2 sentences that change the entire tone or direction of the scene, the chapter, what have you. And I always psych myself up way too much that editing is going to be so awful. How am I ever going to fix this? And there's literally a scene that I was dreading for weeks and weeks and weeks to go back and correct. I had to change 3 words to make it work.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did I do this to myself?
And in your mind, it's a huge thing.
Yeah. It's such a weird process, but I think if people can listen to you and say and really understand that, get it down and then go back, because it's just that's the biggest hurdle, is getting it down and figuring out the story as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you write, 5 or 6 chapters, and then you go back and you get into this intense editing, you get so self-critical that you shut down the creativity. And then that's where people fall into that, I have 6 novels I've started, I've never finished one. Well, I'm pretty sure I know why that is. So you just have to finish it and be willing to edit. Some people aren't. They write it and it's untouchable. That's the magnum opus. That's how it is. You're like, well, okay. But editing is an important part of the process, because you refine the story. You once you've gotten to the end, you know where you need to get, and maybe you go back and you put in some breadcrumbs, and you tie some other things together, and you have these unique opportunities to enrich the story. And if you never allow yourself to do that, you're robbing yourself of your best writing. So.
And that's great stuff. And thanks for sharing that with us. And it actually brought up a comment from one of our viewers. We want to take a second to say hi to Claudia, Mark, and Farmhouse Reader. Thanks for signing in. And another viewer, DHB. This is a really interesting question for you here, Trixie. Okay. So if all of the content is good and everything is, quote, darling, unquote, how do you know when enough is enough? Because DHB says that must be kind of hard.
Well, I think I'm really, since 2019, have been hyper focused on paranormal cozy mystery. So for me, enough is enough when the mystery is solved and the arc for that book is closed off. So I come from a film and television background. So in TV, when you have a long-running series, you have the story that is that episode. When you watch that episode tonight, there'll be closure. You'll have a feeling of closure. However, because the series runs on and we want you to watch next week and the week after that, and the week after that, there's a B story and a C story, sometimes a D story. And that B story may run for 3 episodes. That C story may run for 5 episodes. That D story may be a series arc, that search for the lost parent or whatever, that never ever wraps up until they have their series finale, whatever it is. So having those pieces, you have to close the loop of the book. The mystery that you've provided the reader has to be solved in that book. That mystery readers aren't fans of the cliffhanger endings. That's not a thing in mystery. You have to solve that mystery in that book. However, there can be pieces that will carry on. You can have a character that comes up that has a certain relationship to one of your main characters that now will be explored further in the next book or 2 books down the road or whatever that is. So you have those little pieces, and you have the relationships of the characters who are solving the mystery, and you want to have some pieces that are dropped in each book as you go along there. So if they're having a debate about redecorating, or they're not in agreement about where they're going on vacation or whatever that their little side story is, then you may also need to solve that, or get it to a point where the reader feels a little bit of closure but will be interested to see how that develops in the next book or something like that. So knowing when there's enough in that sense, you have to close the loop. You can't just write half a mystery. You can't just plan half a wedding. You have to close the loop for the readers, but also give them something to look forward to in the next book. So I think hopefully that answers the question.
Do you think when you're in the editing process, and I guess one thing that I find myself coming up against is I have a sentence, and how do I know that this sentence is the best sentence that it can be? And, have I selected the right words? Have I selected the right, is the tone correct? Am I moving it in the right direction? And at some point you just know, this is what it is. And I'm wondering if that feeling is something that is learned over time, or is it something that is kind of, you just inherently know because you're in tune with the piece itself?
Well, answering for myself, I've been writing these characters for a while now, and so I have a feel for how they talk and what their emotional response would be, and so it feels a little bit more innate now. But in the beginning, when I was writing the earlier books in the Mitzi Moon Mystery series, I was getting to know the characters. But my writing is, I see a movie in my head, and I'm just transcribing what I see. So for me, I don't know, that might be a little bit different than how other people experience their story unfolding. But for me, I'm literally watching it in my head, and writing down what I see, kind of a thing. So I get I didn't know the character was going to do that kind of thing. That's real. That really happens, because they do take on a life of their own, and they do argue with me, and they do want to do things differently. And even though I am a planner and I outline and I have my little, 2 or 3 sentence blurb for each scene that I plan, if something happens, I go with it. I don't argue with inspiration in the middle of writing, but I also don't just sit around waiting for inspiration to strike. I write 6 days a week, and that's just my pattern. I write every single day. I do my admin in the morning, I have lunch, I get my recorder, put on my skates, I do my dictation every single day. And so I've trained my brain, I guess, to be in that space and go with it when it happens. And like I said, when I'm in that creative writing space, I don't put limitations, and I don't question it, and I don't worry about that. When I get into the editing space, I'm wearing a different hat, and that's a different process for me. So I'm also not one of those writers who can write one book and edit one book and proof them all at the same time. That's not, I can't do that. I have a flow, and I follow that flow with each book, and I don't really overlap the two, kind of thing. So I don't know.
No, that
Well,
definitely makes sense.
it obviously works, and quite well, because you're a New York Times bestseller, you're an Amazon bestseller, you've got all these books, which kind of leads me into my next question. With your book release, that just came out this week, Rodeo Clowns and Shakedowns, like Sarah said, I agree, best title ever. It is the book 2 in your new series,
Yes.
Harper and Moon Investigations. So this
Right.
is a spin-off series from your Mitzi Moon books, correct?
Right. So the Mitzi Moon Mysteries was the first series. Yep.
Yeah.
And then Harper and Moon Investigations is a spinoff there. Correct.
So can you tell us a little bit about who Harper is, for those of us who weren't with us last time, and also
Sure.
then kind of what the process is or was for you kind of going in that spin-off direction.
Yeah. In the original series, Harper is Sheriff Harper, the sheriff in town who in book one has a run-in with Mitzi and accuses her of murder, as all heroines in cozy mysteries are accused at least once. And she has to, prove her innocence, which leads her to becoming this amateur sleuth. So that was working very well. And her being the amateur sleuth and her snooping and her sticking her nose in his investigations and, whatever happened there was working well. And, book after book after book. But then the relationship started to develop, and I felt like things were moving in a direction where it was going to shift enough that it didn't feel like it could be part of that series. It felt like they were going to become more equal partners, and Eric, Sheriff Harper, would have more of a voice, and then still being Mitzi Moon Mysteries didn't feel authentic to that journey. And so, I came to the natural place to kind of break it off and start their own thing, and having them start their own investigation agency felt like the right way to move that forward. And now in every book there are 3 or 4 chapters that are written from Eric's POV, because it's normally first person from Mitzi's POV, but now there are some chapters from his POV, and the reader seems to like getting that other side of the coin.
Is it fun for you to have more or more voices, I guess, speaking to you when you're writing, rather than just being focused on Mitzi's perspective? I know that in the Mitzi Moon series that there are times where Eric comes in and
Right.
and has
Yeah,
his point of
there were a
view,
couple.
but now that you're like really kind of fleshing it out, is it a different experience? Is it new and exciting? Is it something that's just like feels very natural? How does juggling their voices together work for you?
I like it. I'm a boy mom, so I'm very familiar with how their little brains work, and and to be fair, toward the end of the Mitzi Moon series, there was a lot of push from Eric to be heard, and so it felt very natural. Where we had a few books toward the end where there was a chapter or two from his perspective, and then moving into the new series, it felt very natural that there would continue to be, chapters from his perspective. And it's fun for me as a writer because he sees the town completely differently. He grew up in Cherry Harbor. He's a native of Cherry Harbor. All of his friends went to school there. Everyone knows him in town. He's the hometown hero that went away to the army and came back to be sheriff. And so he doesn't see maybe the decay or the rundown main street, or think of his sheriff station as dilapidated, whereas Mitzi comes from a completely different place, has no emotional attachment to anything in town. And the reader has been getting her perspective on all these venues and things for a while. So it's kind of fun to be able to give them a different perspective too, of what that might look like, or how that person might be interacting.
Well, and speaking of fun, one of the things that's always fun is a giveaway. And
Yes.
folks, we are about halfway through the show, so that means it's giveaway time. And Trixie is being so kind to provide us with a giveaway today. Sarah, you want to tell everybody about it?
Yes, this one is open to all viewers, no matter where you are in the world, which is very exciting. It's an ebook copy of Ropes and Last Hopes, which is the prequel to the sequel of so it kind of sets the scene for everyone for Harper and Moon investigations. So if you would like the chance to win an ebook copy, Trixie, what is the magic word that folks should put into the YouTube chat?
Well, I was starting to get way overcomplicated, and I think we should just go with moon.
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 I think that
Yeah.
that definitely
That's a good one.
works. Perfect. So folks, go ahead make sure you're logged into your Google account, your YouTube account, however you're able to communicate with us in the chat. Type in the word moon to be entered into the giveaway. We'll pull our winner at the end of the hour. While folks are beginning to enter that, we do have a question that I think kind of harkens back to what you were talking about, Trixie, with the with your plotting and mapping out
Yeah.
a book.
Okay.
Let's see. The the question is, how do you keep track of that alphabet, which I believe might be in regards to all of the different names that your book titles have.
I think it's actually A plot, B plot, C plot, or A
there,
story,
yes, yes, yes.
story, and C story.
So
Got
and so the question is the whole story mapped before you begin, or does it develop as you go? So you talked a little bit about your outlining process. So like, I guess, how deep do your outlines go?
My outlines are fairly bare bones. I mean, I know where I'm going beginning to end. Once I get the title, then I start getting into the, who's going to die, who's going to kill him, how's the body discovered, what are the, what are the clues, who are the red herrings, all of that. And I have like maybe a 2 or 3 sentence blurb about each of those scenes. And sometimes that can become an entire chapter, or maybe that'll be part of a chapter, 2 of those will go together to make a chapter or whatever. Or sometimes things will happen as I'm in the middle of writing. I'm like, oh, we'll add that, to fill out that chapter. And then once I get to the editing phase, I'll go back and, sometimes something is missing and I'll add, 250 words or 300 words to a specific chapter to flesh out a particular thing. But of course, the A story is always the mystery for that book. So, who's killed? How are they killed? What are the clues? Who solves it? Whatever that. What happens to the killer? Do they die? Do they get arrested? Do they, whatever that closure is for that particular scene. But then, whether what you're doing with your B or C story would be what's going on with Mitzi. Does she discover she's a psychic sleuth, and she's learning about her powers as she solves crimes. So does she discover a new power? Will that maybe come into play in a book farther down the road where she perfects that because she has to rescue, the ghost of her grandmother from being trapped in an amulet, which she does. But, so a lot of times I just keep track of what I develop in my Scrivener series Bible. So I put I have a, alphabetical list of all character names. I have little bios for every character. I have bios for the places, the particular, the cafe, the bookshop, whatever, sometimes for towns. And then I keep track by book what powers she's developed, so that when I get to the next book, I can go, oh, well, she did that. How can we use that to, work on this thing or whatever. So sometimes that B or C story reveals itself as I'm writing, because I think, we get into something and we think, okay, well, we can close off that piece of it, but we can leave a little bit of it open without really disappointing the reader, but it'll intrigue them to find out, well, what will happen with that, So sometimes my beta readers get a little upset with me, but they know the one thing that I don't do is I've never broken the promise. I've never left something open and not closed it for them. So even if they have to wait a book or two, it pays off. It does pay off. And for people who just pick up wherever and read one, they won't be missing something. They can read it and that mystery will be closed. They'll have the satisfaction of solving that case. But for someone who's reading the series chronologically, they're going to get a little bit more character development, and they'll be kind of in the inner circle, seeing those threads that you may not see if you just picked up a random book in the series.
Mm-hmm. A question that kind of came to my mind, and JC, this might be something that I want your feedback on as well too. Trixie, when you were kind of explaining how Mitzi started out as an amateur sleuth, and now she's transitioned into working for an investigation. They've opened up their own investigation agency. When you're writing an amateur sleuth, and this might differ depending on how far you are in the series. I'm always curious about the investment that the sleuth has to have in the crime when you're maybe like 5, 6 books in, because at that point it's like that this person just loves solving mysteries, so why can't we just like, hey, there's a mystery, like let's go solve it. And so that's one thing that I always struggle with, because when I sit down to write a manuscript, it's like I obviously want to write a mystery where someone wants to solve it, and finding those motivations, making it believable to the reader, but also knowing that like, hey, like I've got like a couple mysteries under my belt right now, like obviously I'm going to get involved with this. So what's the I guess, and maybe now that Mitzi and Eric are working together, how is that setup of the involvement in the mystery different than it was when you originally started writing Mitzi?
Sure. Well, just to be clear, even though it's called Harper and Moon Investigations, there really is no taming Mitzi. So she doesn't play by the rules. She doesn't care about the investigation thing. That's just to make Eric feel better because he's a lawman, so he wants to do it by the book. So good for him. But she still just does everything by the seat of her pants and, lets her psychic abilities run rampant. But in developing the amateur sleuth, for me, it was, she was new in town. She didn't know anyone. So the first mystery, she had to be accused, because if it was someone else, who cares? She doesn't know them. Why would she care? So, we kind of had to work with that. Well, then as she solves that and gets to know some people in town and finds out she has a few allies, even though she was the outsider kind of thing. Then in the next mystery, one of her allies, they have a relative who's been murdered. So that's the connection. So it's kind of, as the character's experience grows in the town, and as they develop different relationships with people, that gives you more opportunities of who to kill and tie it back in. So for Mitzi and for the Harper Moon series, there's always a connection of some kind. And so far it hasn't really been that difficult to make it click. I haven't really had to go very far. I've been able to pull it together in some way or another every time. I mean, we've even accused the sheriff of murder. So we've hit up everybody. And sometimes she'll just find herself in the middle of a crime. One of the things I did with the Mitzi Moon series is I threw in things other than murder. So I would do, murder, something else, murder, something else, murder, something else. So, she finds herself in the middle of a bank robbery, in book 18, and has to try to keep everyone calm. And then there's, finds out there's a ghost in the bank who was trapped there because he was murdered there 50 years ago or whatever, so then she has to solve that crime as well as the current crime. And, so it gives it a little bit more, some more layers for people to get excited about.
JC, what about, because you have also managing several series now, what is your, I guess, tips or tricks that you have for getting your amateur sleuth involved in a crime that they have no right to be involved with?
Well, I always go back to one great piece of advice that my agent gave me when I first started writing mysteries, was for the cozy genre, the amateur traditional sleuth. You need to establish, why is your amateur sleuth the only person who can solve the case? And that could be anything from, like you said, Trixie, that, the amateur sleuth has been accused of the crime, to a family member has been accused. And so they come to that, the sleuth wants to come to their aid. The sleuth found themselves in the middle of something. So that's always kind of one of the things that I've just tried to always keep in mind. It's like, okay, why is, and I even had one story in my Alley Cobb mysteries where it was a cold case. A girl had been missing for 20 years. And since the police had never found the missing girl, when some new evidence seems to kind of come up, the girl's mother comes to Allie because she said, the police, they let me down, so I'm coming to you. So that kind of allowed me to establish that, this is why the sleuth is the only person, or not the only person, but why the sleuth is the person to solve this case. How about you?
Yeah.
I think I'm like still figuring it out. I actually, the book that I'm working on now, I had to throw out the entire plot line because I realized it's like, in the first book, Coco's client is accused of murder. Then in the second book, one of her best friends is accused of murder. And I was like, the third book was going to be the other best friend, but it's like, you know what? That's like a bit too much murder for this small group of friends to be involved with. So I was like, how can I expand my horizons a little bit by still having her invested in solving the case? And so this time it's, the whole internet thinks that she's a deranged killer. So that gives her a little bit of incentive.
Nice.
But yeah, it's always to keep it fresh and to keep it, especially in a small town setting. I think our readers were able to suspend a little bit of belief when we are presenting a cozy mystery to them, because it's like, hey, my town is like 2,500 people, and yet they have like somebody dying like every 6 weeks. Only when my character has been introduced, by the way. So it's like, that's a little suspicious too.
Right, exactly.
So it's always part of the puzzle when you're figuring out, okay, like not only do I have the mystery, but I have this other aspect that I need to fit in and really make those pieces fit along the way, because your sleuth has to be invested throughout the whole mystery. Otherwise, people are like, well, why does she care about this right now? So I always find that to be like one of the biggest hurdles when going through this particular process. It's like, why did I choose mystery? So I'm curious, Trixie, what was it about the mystery genre in general that drew you to it? And then more specifically, the paranormal, because I would love to talk more about your paranormal, because I totally believe in ghosts. I absolutely love anything to do with ghosts. So how did that become your thing?
Well, I originally wrote women's fiction, abject failure. Then I wrote YA fantasy, also abject failure. Then I was going to quit writing. Just because I was 10, 13, but about 14 books in at that point. I couldn't sell $50 worth of books a month. And I just thought, wow, I've really made a terrible choice. This is clearly not for me. And got some really good advice from Derek Murphy and Brian Cohen, just people who are in the industry and who are so generous with their time and so kind to people who are struggling and, don't know which way to turn. And this whole idea of doing research about genres and finding out how your style could fit into a genre that has high demand was quite a new concept to me. And I love mysteries. I'm like, well, what do I watch? What do I read? What do I like? And I'm like, mysteries. I love mysteries. I love detective shows. I love to kind of pit myself against that main character in the movie, TV show, book, and try to solve that crime. Like, okay, all right. But I'm also, I live in Sedona, Arizona, and if anyone knows, I think it's the woo-woo capital of the world. I'm not sure. But if you can cleanse its chakras or take a photo of its aura, it's happening here. So I thought, ooh, paranormal. I like that. Very into ghosts and, psychic, clairaudience, claircognizance, clairvoyance, whatever, tarot cards, all of it. So I thought, okay, all right, I like that. Let's work that in. And, started to develop the bones of what will become the Mitzi Moon Mysteries. And I was fortunate enough to meet a couple of writers at a conference who were already writing in the genre. And it was the first time I'd experienced just like genuine uh, friendship from other authors. In and I can only speak for what I experienced, but there was a level of competitiveness and a level of the pie isn't big enough for everyone in the other genres I had written in and the other authors I'd met. And it just really didn't feel like a very welcoming community. And I got a very different experience when I met these cozy mystery authors. And I was like, I like this. I like I like giving back. I like the feeling of people helping each other out and not worrying that if if you sell a book, that means I don't sell a book. I don't, I've never wanted to have that mentality, and I don't feel like that's the way forward. So the idea that you can help people out and it helps everyone, I liked that, So that coupled with loving mysteries and my, fascination with paranormal, it just kind of started all swirling together and gave me something that I'm proud to say was successful, I was like, and kept me going. So that was a really powerful thing to go from selling no books to absolutely making a living and quitting my day job and not having to worry about any of that and just being able to be like, this is what I was meant to do. I love writing. It's working for me. That is validation. I mean, it's in the beginning, you just have to give yourself validation. But once the wheels are in motion and you are actually selling books and you can see that you can make a career out of it, that's also nice.
Mhm.
you know, that's also a good thing.
Well, and I tell you what, from my perspective, it's really inspiring because and I still have my day job. I love writing, but yeah, it's not it's not the money making career where I can quit the day job. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
us with or sharing with us. Thanks for sharing that with us. You
Yes,
can tell it's
you bet.
Thursday night.
And also to know that, like, your the tries that you had in other genres, and you felt that's like, what, this isn't working, but knowing not to give up. And I think that
Mhm.
that is, like, if any aspiring writer or a writer who is, got, you know in a moment of struggle, like, just don't give up. If it's something that
Yeah.
you really love to do and
Yes,
really brings
exactly.
you joy, even when you're getting rejections, you're getting 1-star reviews, you're getting all these horrible things thrown your way, like, if it still brings you joy, like, it's worth fighting for.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so I think that
Yeah.
to hear that from you is, as JC said, very inspiring. And I'm looking at the time and getting very sad because
Yes.
we're running low on
Boo.
our
That was
bookish
so
hour.
fast.
It
I
it
can't believe.
it
Yeah.
when you're here, it's magic. So it's like
Yeah.
it just flies by, and
Yes.
so
Yeah.
you'll have to come back and join us again. Um,
Okay.
Yes.
and just a quick reminder to folks who are watching us live, our giveaway magic word this evening is moon. So make sure that you type that into the Google
Nice.
chat. Yes, I'm like, and make sure that you enter into the ebook giveaway for Ropes and Last Hopes that Trixie is doing for any of our viewers, wherever you are in the world. And so as we move into our final moments of our bookish hour, Trixie, can you let us know, like, when you are not skating and dictating and editing and doing all the amazing things that you're doing with your books, what are you reading? What are you watching that keeps you entertained? What inspires you to, just like,
Mhm.
or helps you relax after a tough day?
Well, I'm definitely into mysteries, but I'm currently working on, unfortunately at this point, a secret project, so I can't
Ooh.
tell you the details, but I'm watching Northern Exposure reruns for
Oh.
research.
Hmm.
Okay.
So something about Alaska, wink wink. Um uh, so I love to watch TV. That's my brain shut off, because my brain is going 100 miles an hour all day, and for me to just sit down and turn on a program, that's the perfect way to turn my brain off. And reading wise, I do a lot of nonfiction reading,
Hmm.
so I've been reading things like the Enneagram book by Claire Taylor, and I was reading oh gosh, I don't remember the name of it now, but it's like the author estate planning handbook. and I don't remember the
Oh,
author's
okay.
name, unfortunately,
Mhm.
but it's about, how you plan your succession. What do you
Mhm.
do with your business that you've created? How do you hand that off? Because it's very different. You need specialized attorneys, to help you plan an estate that involves copyrights and intellectual property and all of that. So I get involved in that kind of stuff. But the fun read that I had was I was reading the arc of the new um, Magical Renaissance Fair Mysteries, because we read each other's books. So I got to read Nova Nelson's book, All the Fair is a Stage. So that was really fun.
Ooh,
I
I
just
love that
finished that. Yeah.
title.
Yeah, it was super fun. So those will come out in August, when we do our Ren Fair trilogy every year, and those will come out in August. But I got to read hers, and that was fun.
Oh, nice. JC,
Very
what about
cool.
you? What are you consuming since we
So,
last chatted?
yeah, so no big surprise. Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode 2 dropped today. So, of course, I love that is far and away the best Star Trek show of the new batch they've
Really?
been. Yes, hands down the best. Some are great, some are not so great, some are really good. I'm a total Trekkie. Everybody knows I love them all, but Strange New World just hits it out of the park. So that's what I'm watching.
Okay.
What I'm reading is, I don't know if you can see this. This is fun. My older kiddo, Shay, turned me onto this. This is a series of comics, The Great British Bump Off.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
This is from was it Dark Horse Comics? It's the
Uh-huh.
first 3 in a 4 comic series. That's a takeoff on the Great British Bake Off,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
there is somebody, there's an attempted murder. There
Nice.
is a young woman who is the amateur sleuth who takes the lead in investigating the crime. There's
Nice.
even a Poirot name drop,
Really?
as well as all kinds of fun little nods to the actual Great British Bake Off show. So
Oh, that's awesome.
this has been, really fun,
Uh-huh.
and I also want to make sure I've said this before. It's been a while though. Comics, graphic novels, all that stuff. It's every bit as much an art form and a
Yeah.
work of great literature as, Tolstoy is in my book. So,
Uh-huh.
it's great fun. So that's what
Yeah.
I've been writing and reading or reading,
Right.
and I don't know, you know what it is, watching.
Yeah.
I am totally convinced.
Words like that.
Yes. Yeah. Once again, thank goodness I have an editor for my books. Yeah.
Uh,
How about you,
that's
Sarah?
fun.
Well, I have to second I'm still on my manga binge. I honestly have lost track. I'm just going through like all of these series, and it's a blur, and they're so fun, and I absolutely love them. I think the one that I'm reading now is like A Kiss for Me, and it's just like a cute little romance. I just love unwinding to those because again, it's just like it's such like a nice transport and so different than what
Mhm.
I'm used to consuming. But
Yeah.
I have 2 book recommendations. I just finished listening on audiobook to Wendy Walker's book. It's called Don't Look for Me. And it's been a while since I've listened to a psychological suspense. And I forgot like how heart stopping they are, especially when you're listening to it on audiobook, because it was just like I was like
Oh my
looking over my
gosh.
shoulder while I'm like doing the dishes. Is like, is this guy in here? Like it was so. I think I listened to it at 2 times speed because I just needed to like get to the end and figure out like what is going on here. It was really
Oh my
twisty,
gosh.
very very creepy but very enjoyable. And then
Mhm.
I also over the weekend finished reading an ARC copy of Leah Dobrinska's Friends Don't, which is her new rom-com that's coming out. Leah's been on
Oh,
a guest on our show a couple times. She is venturing into the rom-com genre, and she like knocks it out of the park. I like
nice.
absolutely loved it, and it was such a great like beach read. I read it on the porch, so a porch read,
Poetry.
and so it was absolutely fabulous. As for watching, I'm trying to think. Over the weekend, we finally watched the Last Kingdom: Seven Kings Must Die, which
Oh, yeah.
is the movie that is the conclusion to the Last Kingdom TV show,
Right.
which I absolutely love. The movie was wonderful. The ending has had me just like randomly commenting throughout the day, like, I can't believe it. It was so
Oh no.
enjoyable. And I'm trying to,
Good.
if you haven't seen the show, I think it does a well enough job of explaining who the people are, and because it's sort of historical, you can kind of, get clues from that as well.
Uh-huh.
And then we also just started watching Dr. Stone, which is an anime about like people turn into stone, and then 3,700 years later they all wake up and civilization's been completely destroyed, and you
Oh,
have to like rebuild. And it's like, how do you rebuild society when you know everything that you once had?
yeah.
And so it's very interesting and very entertaining. So that's what's keeping me busy when I'm not tearing my hair out over edits.
Yeah.
Yeah, but enough about us, Trixie. Unfortunately, like Sarah said, our time is short. Once again,
Yes.
congratulations on the new release.
Thank you.
Folks, go out and get it because it's a bestseller for a reason. So for folks who are new fans to you, Trixie, where can they find you online? Maybe in person? Any conferences coming up? Let us know.
Yeah. Nothing in person right now. I do have my website, Trixie Silvertale, and it's TALE, trixiesilvertale.com. And all of my ebooks are available on Amazon exclusively. Paperbacks are available all over, and my audiobooks are available even more all over. I have distribution through Find the Way Voices on those, so even
Nice.
through libraries and everything. And I think we're up to book 19. We're doing the final QC on book 20 in the Mid-Sea Moon series for audio, and then book 21 should come out next month. So then that series will be complete in audio.
I absolutely love audio, so that's exciting. And Find Away Voices for folks, for writers who are searching for, that the ability to get into audiobook. I started using Find Away Voices for one of my series, and I've been very happy with being able to be like everywhere. It's really exciting.
It's nice. Yeah. Yeah. And they're very easy to work with as opposed to ACX, which is a little bit more of a hurdle.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed. Well, Trixie, this has been fabulous as always. I hope that you will come back and join us when we have more books to talk about. I mean, we still didn't get to dive into really like the paranormal and fleshing out like what about it drew you to just like in general, like ghosts and seances and all of that. So we'll have to table that for when you come back next time.
Okay.
For now, though, we have to do your giveaway winner announcement.
Yes.
Let's see. Drum roll, since JC, you're here for our drum roll that we have.
Yes.
Our winner this evening is Claudia Carpenter.
All right,
Congratulations, Claudia.
Hooray.
What we will do is go ahead and send me, this is going to be a fun little blurb. Send me an email with the email that you would like me to send to Trixie.
Right.
And we'll get that information on over to her. Congratulations.
Great.
To everybody
Perfect.
who had joined us for the live show. Thank you as always for being here, for asking your questions, for sharing your enthusiasm for all things bookish. And a big thank you to Trixie for being here and celebrating release week and enlightening us with all of these amazing inspirational stories that we can take to just really hone our craft, as well as the notion to keep on writing and
definitely
following those dreams. So thank you again for being here this evening. And for our viewers, we will see you in July. We're taking a little bit of a hiatus, enjoying a little bit of the summertime over here. But when we come back, we will have more bookish things for you. But until then, we will see you and stay bookish. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you for being here.